Hello everybody and welcome to texturesforphotoshop.com tutorials channel, the place where you learn how to use textures in Photoshop to create interesting effects. In this video tutorial I will show you how to create a Christmas snow globe, and for this we will use several textures that you can download from Textures for Photoshop for free. You can find the download link in the description below. So let's get started. We'll start with the background layer, which is filled with white, and I added a few layer styles to it, and I added a color overlay, which is orange, and a gradient overlay, and I chose a radial overlay with the settings for the gradient that goes from dark gray to gray. And this is how the background looks. I then added a snow globe texture, and because the original snow globe texture was not transparent, I had to do some modifications to it, and here's how I did it. So first of all, I added a mask. Then I hid the background layer to get a transparent background, and then clicking on the mask, I went to image, apply image, and using the default settings I click OK. Then while on the mask I click Ctrl I to invert the mask, and I have a snow globe which is transparent, because the snow globe should be glass that is transparent. However, this is a bit too transparent, so to modify it I go to image adjustment levels and play around a bit with the settings. So if I drag this white point down a bit and push up the dark point to something like this, and also drag the midpoint down a bit. Okay, so using these settings I get a snow globe which is transparent. Another thing that I did is I added a few layer styles to the snow globe. I used an inner shadow and an inner glow, and here's what these effects do. They just build up the effect of the sphere that is the snow globe to give it a more 3D look. You can grab these settings that I use here in the layer styles from the PSD file that I will post in the description of this video. Okay, so going further, we want to first show the background layer, and then we will work on the contents of the snow globe, which we want to look something like this. And here's how to do it. I prepared a group which contains all the textures that I will place inside the snow globe. First we'll use this frozen snow texture, and I put this in the group because I want to use a mask on the group to only show the textures inside the snow globe. So to do this I will click Ctrl on the snow globe texture, and then clicking on the group and click the mask icon, I get this mask that shows only what is inside the snow globe. Then on the frozen snow texture I want to use this as a base for what the contents of the snow globe, so I will also use a mask here, and then using a brush with the opacity to 100% and a soft brush with the color black, I'll just mask out parts of this texture and leave only a base for it. Okay, next I'm using this horse, rocking horse texture to place inside the snow globe, and it appears as if it sits on the snow that we put in a bit earlier. Then I'm using this fir branches texture, and as you can see this texture is only visible inside the snow globe because I'm using the mask. And then I'm using a levels adjustment layer, and to add an adjustment layer for the levels you just go to adjustment layers and click levels, And here are the settings. I push down a bit on the white point, drag the dark point up, and also the midpoint to the right a bit, and this creates a scene with a bit more contrast to it. The next texture I used is this snowing texture, which looks like this. So to blend it with the snow globe, I just switched the blending mode to screen, and also I added another texture, which is this bokeh lights texture, and to blend it in with the rest of the content, I just switch the blending mode to screen and pull down the opacity a bit. Good. The next thing we want to do is to enhance the snow globe to make it look even more like a glass snow globe. So I duplicated the snow globe texture and placed it on top. And for this I also used a few effects. So first of all, I switched the blending mode from normal to screen, and then the layer styles that I used are just a bit of inner glow, then a gradient overlay, so he's without the inner glow and with the inner glow. Then this is what the gradient overlay does. It just adds a bit to the depth of the snow globe, and I also added an outer glow just to make it look a bit like it's glowing. And now we get this effect, which looks nice. However, it makes the glass of the snow globe a bit too opaque, so to make it a bit more transparent, I used another levels adjustment layer. So this layer with the levels, I just took the dark point and bring it up a bit, just like this. Now we have these nice highlights in the snow globe, and the glass is a bit more transparent. Okay, now we have this snow globe, and I just added base to this snow globe, and here's how it should look like. Okay, and I'll quickly explain how I made this. So first of all, I made a shape by choosing a vector shape, a rounded rectangle, and I just drew a rectangle underneath the globe, something like this. And okay, so now to modify this vector shape, I just go to the add anchor point tool, and I can add a point here by clicking on it and then using the keyboard to drag it down with the down arrow key, and then add another point here and drag it to the left, and add another point here and drag it to the right, and also add another point here and drag it a bit down. And this is basically how you get a shape that looks like a base for the snow globe. Okay, let me delete this. So now that I have a shape for the base, I want to add a texture to it. So I used this wood texture. Let me show you how the texture looks like. Originally this was wood texture with straight lines, and to get to this shape, to make it a bit rounder, I used Edit, Transform and the Warp tool, and this allows me to drag on these points and make the texture rounder. And because this is on top of the shape, I can right click and say create clipping mask, and now the texture is only visible in the part where the base is. Now to give the base a bit of depth so that it looks 3D, I used a couple of layer styles, and I used an inner shadow just to give the shadow of the snow globe. So the snow globe casts a shadow on the base. Then we have an inner glow, and then we have this color overlay just to make the texture appear a bit lighter, and then we have this gradient overlay with these settings, and this creates this 3D look to the base. One last detail for the base is this shadow, and it's very easy to create the shadow. I simply use the ellipse tool and draw an ellipse underneath, and if you double click on it, you can select black as the color and then go to filter, blur, and Gaussian blur. It will ask you if you want to rasterize the layer, and yes, we want to rasterize it, and then you just play around with the settings of the blur, not too much. You can go as high or as low as you want to, and of course you can duplicate it and resize it and build up a shadow effect that looks more like this. Another thing is that I added a metal plate to this base, and I created this metal plate simply by choosing a vector tool to create a rectangle, and I just added a few layer styles to this rectangle. We have an inner shadow that gives this 3D look to the plate, a gradient overlay, some gold colors. So this gradient overlay with the gold colors makes this look like the plate is made of gold or brass. And we also have a drop shadow to add to the 3D effect so that the plate looks embossed. And then I added a bit of text, and this text, okay, and we have this text on top of the plate. And this text is made with a Bakery regular font, and this font you can find for free online. And the layer styles for this text are just bevel and emboss, inner shadow, bit of inner glow, a color overlay to make it dark, and a drop shadow which is very subtle, and you get these embossed letters in the metal tag of the base. Alright, so we're getting there. We have just a few touches to make, and one is a trick that I use often to make the result look sharper. So if I click Ctrl Shift Alt and E, this creates a copy of all visible layers, and it merges those layers into one image. And then I can use this to go to Filter, Other, and High Pass with a setting of around 3 pixels is good. Then if I switch the blending mode to Overlay, I get this effect, and he's without the high pass filter, and is with the high pass filter, and as you can see I have a sharper image. The last thing that I did is I added a border to this to make this look more like a Christmas card, and it's very easy to create a border like this. Let me just show you. If I click Ctrl Shift N, make a new layer. So I made a new layer, and then if I hit Shift F5, this fills up the layer. I'll drag down the fill to 0 because I don't need the fill of this layer, and then double clicking on the layer I go to stroke, and then I choose a light yellow for the border and make the size as big as I need, and that's it. So here it is, the final result. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. You have the links for the textures in the description below. If you have any questions about this tutorial, please don't hesitate to drop a comment, and I'll try to answer as soon as possible.